Hey everyone, Jeremy here, and guys, I'm very excited for the conversation we have for you today on the Command Your Brand podcast. We have Dana Frost with us today, and she's a wellness expert and the host of the Vitally You podcast. She's helping people to shine a light on how you can feel younger while growing older. Dana, thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm happy to be here.
So I'm really interested to find out a little bit about your story. You know, like how did you get into this whole world, and why do you have such a passion for helping people in this way?
Yeah, Jeremy, I found myself in a health crisis in 2011, and my healing journey really led me down the discovery of what was going on with me and my health. And what I discovered is that my conventional doctors really did not have the answers. I mean, I at the time, I needed a pacemaker. So I don't know if I should just take you right back to the emergency room where it really started, where I was, really awakened to a health issue that I had that I wasn't aware of. So I had gone to the museum with my children and my friends, and I was really, really hungry. And so we were on our way back to the house, and, the car's full and we're all chatting, and I'm really hungry. And all I can think about is I've got to get home so that I can make homemade guacamole and have a healthy snack. So just for the listeners to know.
There's never anything wrong getting back for guacamole, though,
I know.
will say.
That's so true. I know. And so that's what I was thinking about. And, I like to share that because I really had been a healthy person in terms of diet and exercise since my adult life. So I had been juicing since the early 90s. Most of my food was homemade. So I like to share that because sometimes people think it's just about the food. So, and it's about so many other things. So anyway, I couldn't wait to get home to make this guacamole, and I ended up stabbing. I was working so quickly with a knife. I don't know how many of you have actually taken the pit out of an avocado, but sometimes it can be a little bit challenging, to say the least. Yeah,
you got to rotate the knife around that thing and hopefully get it apart without cutting your fingers off.
Yeah, well, I did learn a very skilled way after I did this. But anyway, I ended up stabbing my finger in between my second and third finger with a knife. And what would any woman with, kids waiting to be fed and herself hungry do? I did what most women would do. I quickly washed it off, and I'm like, I cannot go to the emergency room right now. There's just no way. I'm in the middle of dinner. We have guests. I'm hungry. So I cleaned it up. I bandaged it together and continued. And I said out loud, I will call the emergency room and see if they're busy. And if they're not busy,
oh my gosh,
I'll take myself there. This is very typical to women.
Well, I get that too, and because I know for me, I'm thinking back actually of one specific time that I was getting ready for a birthday party to make sure everything was good for the kids and everything was in good shape, and we have pigs on our property, and I wanted to make sure the fence was up and everything else, and I'm holding the fence post, and I slammed my finger with a sledgehammer, and I split my finger wide open. And I'm like, all right, duct tape, let's try and make this happen. And I will tell you though, Dana, I didn't go to the emergency room, and it healed up to a point, but I still have weird feeling in that finger. And you should definitely get things handled and not kind of put them on the back burner.
Yes, that is so true, Jeremy. So I fed everybody, I ate, I called the emergency room, and they said, we're not busy here. So my friend stays with all of the kids, and I go over to the emergency room, and I will tell you one thing I'm nervous about. Not the stitching, but I knew I needed a tetanus shot, and I don't like needles. So in my mind, the worst case scenario was I'm going to get a tetanus shot. The intake nurse takes my pulse, pauses, and looks at me and says, by any chance, are you an endurance athlete? And I'm like, no, I mean, I walk and I do exercise, but I'm not a super athlete or anything like that. And my pulse was 36 beats per minute, which is very, very slow for a normal person. And I'm a normal person. So that was a flag to her. They admitted me. They looked at the finger. They weren't at all concerned with the finger. somebody eventually came in and gave me what felt like truly a little prick for the tetanus shot. But suddenly there was a stream of cardiologists and the cardio team coming on board to
Wow.
figure out what was going on. And so they asked me all the questions and I answered them. And as I answered the questions, it became clear to them that there really was something else going on. So that started. I was admitted. Eventually, I had a pacemaker implanted because I had bradycardia, which is the electrical conduction of my heart really just was functioning like I was an 80-year-old woman. They said it's like a worn out body part.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, they ruled out Lyme's disease and other potential infections that could have caused this, that could have been treated with medicine. So my doctor assured me that I would feel like my old self once the pacemaker was implanted. And in reflection, I had to see in hindsight that I had been very, very tired. And I, concluded, like many women conclude, that it was just stress. I had 5 kids at home. My oldest had just graduated from high school, and my husband traveled a lot, and we had recently gone to Turkey for a wedding. And I remember being in Istanbul, and I was always behind my family. And me, who at one point I was, super power walker, I would ask to sit down on a bench and rest. And I couldn't keep up. So in hindsight, I could look back and go, wow, I really was tired. And that was a red flag. But, I miss that. And many women really miss these signs that their body's giving them. So that started when the pacemaker was implanted, and Jeremy, I did not feel better. I felt just as tired. Yes, my pacemaker.
So there was definitely like more happening than that whole situation.
Yeah, and so the cardiologist did, a series of different tests to figure out there was nothing else going on with my heart other than the burned out electrical conduction, and the pacemaker, was the answer for that. So I went on this journey of figuring out why I was so tired, and also I was having other symptoms that I just really wasn't paying attention to. I wasn't sleeping well. I had menopausal transition symptoms. So as I started learning more about what was happening, and I eventually found a holistic internist who was able to set me on this healing journey using alternative methods, traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture. I discovered HeartMath. What I realized, Jeremy, why I'm so passionate about this idea of feeling younger, growing older, is we can have health challenges that actually do expedite aging. We know that inflammation expedites aging. We know that chronic pain expedites aging. And I was experiencing those symptoms, and I did not feel a vibrant 45. And what I discovered in my healing journey is I feel so much better, having taken the steps to take care of myself and healing some of the issues that were happening in my life, including stress and my response to stress. I realized this is available to everyone. And yeah, so, I don't know, that's part of my story. That's, the impetus for the inspiration.
So let me ask you this then, because I there's a couple really interesting threads in this I want to pull on a little bit, and because one I've seen so true, where you talk about like body stress and things like that, causing aging and things. I've looked at some family members that had like debilitating arthritis, and they're old before their time or things like that. So it is very true that can happen. So I guess when you looked at that then, how did you start to look at the different aspects of a person, and what were those to you? Because I think many times, especially when we're looking at things from a medical viewpoint, we look at people not really as the composite we are, but as like, okay, this is the symptom, this is how we treat the symptom, rather than like, okay, so this is the whole person and what they look like. So for you, how did you start to kind of look at the different composite parts of a person and what a whole person looks like?
Yeah, That's such a great question, Jeremy, and thank you for highlighting that question, because it's something that we really want to be talking about.
Yeah.
Foundationally, even prior to my health crisis, I knew, based on my coach framework and training, I've been a life coach since 2006, that the body talks and the body keeps score. And the language that we have with the body, it is in the form of red flag symptoms, physiological signs that something's going on with the body. I, even with all my training and what I felt was communication with my body, missed my symptoms, because I think that's sort of the challenge of women in terms of how we view stress and our roles and responsibilities. So part of it is just, paying attention to the physical symptoms. And then we really have to look at the full, what are our thoughts? What are our emotions? How are they engaged with our physiology? And what's coming up from the soul? So we really, that mind, body, soul connection, it can seem overemphasized, if you will. And it's sort of, we toss that around so easily without understanding the depth of the impact when we really take a look at the mind and what's happening in the mind. What are our thoughts? What is happening with our emotions, and what is the emotional landscape? Because what I believe is, and I know this to be true because in my own healing journey, I could go back and see these patterns, thought patterns in my approach to stress and my roles and responsibilities. We have a belief, and those beliefs get patterned from early childhood, even in the womb. So we have a belief, and then from the belief, we'll have thoughts about our experiences and our relationship to the world, to people in our life. And those thoughts actually create the emotional response. From the emotional response, there is an energetic response. And that energy, if we don't feel all the feelings, metabolize them, allow the body to actually move through them, that energy can get stuck in the tissues. And when the energy gets stuck in the tissues, that's where we have the possibility of having dis-ease. You mentioned arthritis. Even arthritis, I can tell you, when I was in my 20s, arthritis is one of the antecedents in my family history. I was getting achy joints already in my 20s. And thankfully, I was turned on to this idea of eliminating dairy. And then I stayed active. So that eliminated the joint pain at that point in my life. But this is really what happens. Even if we have trauma that's not metabolized, where does it get stuck? It gets stuck in our joints. So it's not really, I think I alluded to this earlier, Jeremy, it's not really just food. It's never just, think about my case. I had a pacemaker implanted. From the electrophysiologist perspective, that was the fix. We'll just quickly fix this. But it wasn't a fix, because it's never, if that electrical conduction burned out in a 45-year-old woman, and when they look at pathology, that normally happens, decades down the road in typical physiology, there are threads of connection from other areas in a person's life. And I really had to discover those threads. I don't know what
I want to bring one thing in from this, Dana, before we get too far away from it, because you gave me a really great thought, and I want to bring this in here because it's important. And you talk about your experiences and things like that. I think it's also part of what we consume as well, right? Like, it's the music you're listening to, it's the news we're consuming, it's all these other things where we're like, if we're pumping up our stressors all the time, we're making these things worse.
Amen to that. Yes. Okay. So
I didn't want to get too far away from it where it wasn't relevant.
No. Okay. I'm so glad that you highlighted that, because the body actually doesn't distinguish between different kinds of stress. There's the body responds as a dog would respond. It's just really in the present moment, and there's no story or narrative. And so when what I just lost my train of thought.
We were talking about like, the stress and the other things
Oh
around
yeah,
us
the
kind of
body
popping us up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. The body just doesn't know the difference. Matter of fact, it doesn't know the difference if it's exercise, and we know that stress exercise can be very good for us.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't know the difference if it's because we are being chased by a lion, or if it's because our thoughts are fueled by fear. And actually, we've nothing to be afraid of, but our thoughts and our belief is making us feel fear. The body
Mm-hmm.
does not distinguish between those different kinds of stress. And so
it's really interesting when you look at it like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is where, we really have to slow everything down if we want to be empowered in our health. And if we indeed do want to feel younger growing older, we really have to dig deep into all of our systems and really take an honest look at ourselves, our life. What are, from the functional lens, we look at antecedents. What's our health history from our family members? We look at our triggers. What are the things in our life that have been triggers that we can, draw this arrow to the different our physiological challenges that we have? And then what are the things in our life that make those symptoms better or worse? Mm-hmm. And what often for what I've seen in my own life and even working with clients prior to being engaged in this health, umbrella, is you shall know the truth and the truth shall set you free. Mm-hmm. We really have to be willing, it's not easy, to take an honest inventory of ourselves.
It's really interesting too, because I feel like that goes in alignment with what you were talking about in the beginning when you're talking about, you cut your finger and you were worried about, well, I have a party and I have all these other things happening. And I think kind of the first step to all these different things is, being willing to kind of in some ways put your own needs first, which we have to do as a person to be able to be there for other people.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Jeremy. When I started my coaching practice, when I was living in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and the hesitation from the women I was coaching is, well, this feels selfish. Mm-hmm. And as women, we have this false idea that self-care is selfishness. And I had to shine a light on myself in my own life. I mean, look, I still carry that, 10 years down the road.
Sure.
I was still struggling with paying attention to what my own needs were. And what I've discovered, over this more than a decade, more than 15 years, is the only way to show up in the world and actually to feel younger growing older is to take care of yourself, and everybody else will be the beneficiary. First, you'll be the beneficiary, and then secondly, the people you love the most will be the beneficiary.
Well, I guess when we look at that then, so, it can be sometimes easier said than done, because it can be very hard to look at that. But I guess once we're able to confront that, what things in our daily life should we be taking a look at to kind of, handle these component parts the right way?
Yeah. I believe that it starts with getting quiet. And sometimes we don't like that because we're so busy. But I'm
an East Coast person, Dana. We don't do quiet well.
I know. Most modern people don't do quiet well. And even
right.
Some people have to be in motion when they're quiet. And so each person is different. So you mm-hmm. really have to look at yourself. But I really do believe it is essential that step number one is getting quiet. Mm-hmm. What's inside your physiological symptoms, you're not going to be able to see them when you're in motion and when you
yes.
have all these distractions. And even, for clients who just really struggle with getting quiet, we can start with 1 minute a day. It really, we start with where we are. If it's 1 minute a day, an island of respite where you just say, I'm going to turn my eyes inside. I'm going to, just be with myself and be quiet for 1 minute. I have yet to have one person not snowball that into, oh, wow, that was really significant. I want more. I want more. I'm willing. And so when you get quiet, you begin to pay attention to what's going on. And then we can start asking questions, and we can do inventories of, our roles and relationships and what's going on. How's the body responding? There's this tool that I ask clients to do where they take a 24-hour period and they just make quick notes, 0 to 10. How am I responding to this person I'm with? How do I feel right now in this interview? Do I feel like I'm in flow? Do I feel relaxed, or are my muscles tensed up? Do I feel like I want to move towards this person or towards this activity or not? And when you do an inventory, this is how I'm honestly feeling in these situations. You begin to understand what the energy that it's takes for you to have your being in this world under the conditions, under your current conditions, whatever they are. That's really where I start. It's curiosity, Jeremy, being curiosity for what's really going on.
That's really interesting too, because I think we don't really make time for that, and I can like, here's the interesting part to it too, and this is a simple thing, but to me it seems profound, right? Is you take some time to just be quiet and kind of be in the space that you're in, and you kind of realize, well, shoot, man, I haven't been here for a little while. Like, oftentimes we're so many, our attention's on so many other things, we're not kind of being where we are when we're there. And because of that, we don't see these things, and we don't experience these things, and we don't kind of know what's happening with the body.
That's very true. You have to bring your consciousness into it. And it's no different than when you start working out and you're building a muscle. And it's the same with the body, with the mind, with this quietness is really a soul practice. In all those arenas, it starts with noticing and curiosity. And that just, it's like a little trail that you follow, your own curiosity that you follow, that really begins to initiate kind of this vitality inside. Because when you start to notice the things, the people that agree with you, that don't agree with you, and you can start making changes. Sometimes the people in our intimate circle don't really like the changes we're making. Sometimes it leads to some, it always leads to changes. But the reward on the other side, we really start gaining this information and are able to create scenarios and understand what's the best way to take care of myself, which I think is really important. And there are so many different ways to look at it, in terms of each person is different. So, yeah.
And you know what's interesting about that too, because you mentioned listening to your body, and I feel like, and that's kind of a theme we've been talking about through this whole conversation. I feel like for me in my mid to late 30s, that's kind of the biggest thing that, I have learned, frankly, that I didn't know at, 20, 21, whatever it may be, when I thought I could kind of physically conquer the world, is I've learned, like, to listen to my body, right? Like, oh, you know what? Like, I'm having some hamstring trouble today. I think squatting may be a really poor idea. But it's kind of realizing, like, what are the signals and the signs your body's giving you, and how should you respond to those? Like, just pushing through it sometimes isn't a great idea.
Yeah, it's rarely a great idea, I would say. And I think that's our MO in our modern culture, in Western culture for sure, is just to push through it. Look, I pushed through that, the dinner that evening of my crisis. I pushed through so many, and in reflection, I could see that I pushed through so many things where I needed more support. I mean, ultimately, what I have found with most people, they need more support than they have, and they need to give themselves permission for support. And that support can be personal, it can be, I remember when we were raising our young children before we left the U.S., so, we were young professionals and we had young children, and this was, in hindsight, it was so smart. We contracted a babysitter, and we paid her, as a young high school girl, we paid her every Saturday night whether or not we used her. And what that set in motion, we knew we were going to pay her, and so even if we just went for a walk or something simple, we did it That's support for a young family. And what we found, the reason we set that in motion is because we weren't doing it. You wait, you're busy, and you wait until the last minute and you think, oh gosh, it sure would be nice to have some adult conversation and just to get out and be together. And if you leave that without planning, it just doesn't happen. That just kind of came to me, and that was, really a spark of genius on our part that we just kind of stumbled into.
Well, I think that's a great point, though, too, because I think that's one of those things that people don't acknowledge as well. Because I know something that we did this year is we're getting an au pair this summer, which I'm actually really excited for, because I work a lot, right? And I probably work more because we're trying to spend time with the kids and everything else. And if you could just be doing what you're doing while you're doing it, at the same time, you can spend more time with your family. You can enjoy more things. You can be present. You can kind of handle those areas of your life. And when you can, you can be healthier. And I think that's a really big deal.
Oh, I think that's so true, Jeremy. One of the things I learned living abroad in South America is what I saw is that families had exponentially more support in South America because they actually had support in the home. And, what we have in the U.S. is in, two parents working, there's childcare, but it's not really enough. Or if you've got one person who's with the children and one person who's working, you still have two people who are working full time and they don't have support.
Yep.
And so I think it's really, when we're overworking and when the stress load, it's all about the load, right? When the stress load is too much, the body, there's a weight on the body, a physical weight, an energetic weight, and that has long-term consequences.
Yeah. Well, Dana, this has been an awesome conversation. We really got into some really deep stuff here. And I guess for people listening, they want to find out more about you. If they're hearing this is resounding to them, and they really want some help. How's the best way for them to connect with you?
So they can find me at my website, danafrost.com. They can find me at my podcast, Vitally You. And that's everywhere where podcasts are shared. And on Instagram. And that's Dana Frost, Vitally You on Instagram.
Very cool. Well, Dana Frost, thank you so much for joining me on the Command Your Brand show today.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. It's been a pleasure.